Hello book lovers, welcome to Uncommon Reader. My name is Daniela and today we are starting my first reading vlog and I will be reading The Call of the Wild by Jack London. I bought this book at the Jack London Historical Park last autumn. It's the ranch bought by Jack London where he lived his last years of his life and started farming, among other things, while writing. And the place, it's just breathtaking. The location, it's beautiful. It's in the Sonoma Valley in Northern California. If you visit there, you must take a peek at this place. You only pay for the parking, the car parking, which is I think $15, and then you have access to the different locations. It's really a magical place. The cottage where he lived with his wife, and the house he was building, the Wolf House, beautiful landscapes, and the museum, of course. I'm a little scared of reading this book because The Call of the Wild is Jack London's best known book. It follows Buck, a huge Saint Bernard, as he's kidnapped from his comfortable life in California and transported to the Klondike Gold Rush. His abductors sell him to be used as a sled dog for the miners in the north. He slowly discovers his ancient roots, as his civilized upbringing is slowly eroded by the harsh realities of life on the trail. London drew upon his experience in the Yukon to produce a realistic adventure. Here we go. There's something about the Historical State Park Museum, built by Charmian, Jack's wife, after London's death in 1916. The House of Happy Walls was designed to be a museum as well as her home. She lived there from 1935 until 1945 when she broke her hip. She returned to the cottage where she lived until she died in 1955. Today, the museum includes displays of many rooms with a complete set of first edition books by Jack London. Charmian's 1901 Steinway piano, I saw it, and many unique crafts and mementos collected in their travels around the world. I can't wait to visit the historical park again, and if I find them, I'm going to share with you some footage, little videos that I shot during my visit. I actually did a travel vlog for my Italian channel, so if you want to take a peek, you probably won't understand the Italian descriptions, but you can just follow along the visuals, I guess. So what I've done with my Italian channel for reading vlogs, I usually read a few phrases from the book and then share my thoughts on wherever I am in the book. And then I share some parts of my life. So you might see things that are not really related to the book itself, but just, to give you a glimpse of my life and that you may care or not, I don't know, you let me know. But let's start The Call of the Wild together. And the first chapter, it's called Into the Primitive. Buck did not read the newspapers, or he would have known that trouble was brewing, not alone for himself, but for every tidewater dog, strong of muscles and with warm, long hair, from Puget Sound to San Diego, because men groping in the Arctic darkness had found a yellow metal, and because steamship and transportation companies were booming the find, thousands of men were rushing into the Northland. These men wanted dogs, and the dogs they wanted were heavy dogs with strong muscles by which to toil and furry coats to protect them from the frost. Buck lived in the big house in the sun-kissed Santa Clara Valley, Judge Miller's place, it was called. It stood back from the road, half hidden among the trees, through which glimpses could be caught of the wide, cool veranda that ran around its four sides. And over this, Buck ruled. Here he was born, and here he had lived the 4 years of his life. It was true. There were other dogs. There could not but be other dogs on so vast a place, but they did not count. They came and went, resided in the populous kennels or lived obscurely in the recesses of the house, after the fashion of Toots, the Japanese pug, or Isabel, the Mexican hairless, strange creatures that rarely put nose out of the door and set foot to ground. On the other hand, there were the fox terriers, a score of them at least, who yelled fearful promises at Toots and Isabel, looking out of the windows at them and protected by a legion of housemaids armed with brooms and mops. But Buck was neither house dog nor kennel dog. The whole realm was his. He plunged into the swimming tank or went hunting with Judge's sons. He escorted Molly and Alice, the Judge's daughters, on long twilight or early morning's rambles. On wintry nights, he lay at the Judge's feet before the roaring library fire. He carried the Judge's grandsons on his back or rolled them in the grass and guarded their footsteps through wild adventures down to the fountain of the stable yard and even beyond, where the paddocks were and the berry patches. Among the terriers, he stalked imperiously, and Toots and Isabel he utterly ignored, for he was king all over creeping, crawling, flying things of Judge Miller's place, humans included. See, just a couple of pages, and right away you have this signature style where Jack really entices you with his language, always a little bit humorous, to the point, making the characters very, very clear from the beginning. I just love his writing. So this is where I live, guys, by the Adriatic Sea. This is a nice walk, and here, my library. Beautiful views of the beach. It's named after a famous poet that lived in my town. And this is the old part of town. Doesn't it look like Venice? There's a restaurant in the summertime. And I totally love this court. Wait for it. These bright windows. And here are more places to eat. In the summer, it's packed. So I'm almost half through the book. I've read 3 chapters, they're not that many, and today I'm going to share a little bit of Jack's writing. It's hard to read this book. There's a lot of violence, and our Buck, happily living in a family, loved and revered like a king, suddenly gets stolen. The gardener decided to steal the dog and sell it to people that needed sled dogs. The reaction from Buck was quite interesting, because so shocked and surprised, and then he was expecting to see familiar faces after, like, oh, maybe it's a game, it's a new thing, and instead he was caged for 2 days with no food and no water. So he started to get angry. And once he got out of the cage, where this man was finally the one that was supposed to take care of him, he tried to attack him when he was out of the cage. And this guy, of course, he wouldn't have it. And he started beating him he beat them so hard for a long time because he was trying to react and to fight back. And here's what Jack describes. When Buck's senses came back to him, but not his strength, he was where he had fallen, and from there he watched the man in the red sweater. So this guy has a southern USA accent, so forgive me. I'm gonna try to do my best. Answer to the name of Buck, quoting from the saloon keeper's letter, which had announced the consignment of the crate and contents. Well, Buck, my boy, he went on in a genial voice, we've had a little ruction, and the best thing we can do is to let it go on that. You've learned your place, and I know mine. I feel like laughing. Be a good dog, and all go well, and the goose hang high. Be a bad dog, and I'll wait the stuffing out of you. Understand? As he spoke, he fearlessly patted the head he had so mercilessly pounded, and though Buck's hair involuntarily bristled at touch of the hand, he endured it without protest. When the man brought him water, he drank eagerly, and later bolted a generous meal of raw meat, chunk by chunk, from the man's hand. He was beaten, he knew that, but he was not broken. He saw once for all that he stood no chance against a man with a club. So the story continues when all the dogs are reunited so they can start this journey. And this is the first encounter of Buck with the snow. He felt it, as did the other dogs, and knew that a change was at hand. Francois leashed them and brought them on deck. At the first step upon the cold surface, Buck's feet sank into a white, mushy something very like mud. He sprang back with a snort. More of this white stuff was falling through the air. He shook himself, but more of it fell upon him. He sniffed it curiously, then licked some up on his tongue. It bit like fire, and the next instant was gone. This puzzled him. He tried it again with the same result. The onlookers laughed uproariously, and he felt ashamed. He knew not why, for it was his first snow. Sweet. Okay, I'm just going to read a few things more, but I just want to tell you, yes, I'm not going to spoil all the story, because of course, if you are interested in reading it, you should, enjoy it. What I can say is that I just find and encounter again this beautiful, amazing talent that Jack London has to be able to be credible and tell you what you think it's possible an animal can think, how they can reason and how they can react to things. It's really like he is in these creatures' heads. So the next phase of the book follow the dogs that are forming the expedition, sort of, smelling each other and trying to figure out who's the boss, and sort of very suspicious of one another. And since they're all new to the adventure, besides one, Spitz, who's clearly the leader. But they're fighting, Buck, of course, no experience at all. He watches all these dogs stealing from each other food, but quickly Buck kind of picks up the behavior and learns to act like them to survive, right? This is the survival mode, and it's very interesting to see how his primordial senses comes out of him eventually. The first death marked Buck as fit to survive in the hostile Northern environment. It marked his adaptability, his capacity to adjust himself to changing conditions, the lack of which would have meant swift and terrible death. It marked further the decay or going to pieces of his moral nature, a vain thing and a handicap in the ruthless struggle for existence. It was as well enough in the Southland under the law of love and fellowship to respect private property and personal feelings, but in the Northern, under the law of club and fang, Whoso took such things into account was a fool, and in so far as he observed them, he would fail to prosper. And not only he did learn by experience, but instinct, long dead, came alive again. The domesticated generations fell from him. In vague ways, he remembered back to the youth of the breed, to the time the wild dogs ranged in packs through the primeval forest and killed their meat as they ran it down. It was no task for him to learn to fight with cut and slash and the quick wolf snap. In this manner had fought forgotten ancestors. They quickened the old life within him, and the old tricks which they had stamped into the heredity of the breed were his tricks. They came to him without effort or discovery, as though they have been his always. And when on the cold, still nights he pointed his nose at the star and howled long and wolf-like, it was his ancestors, dead and dust, pointing nose at star and howling down through the centuries and through him. And one last part, Buck becomes a big rival for Spitz once he gains confidence in himself. From then on was war between them. Spitz, as lead dog and acknowledged master of the team, felt his supremacy threatened by this strange Southland dog. And strange Buck was to him, for of the many Southland dogs he had known, no one had shown up worthily in camp and on trail. They were all too soft, dying under the toil, the frost, and starvation. Buck was the exception. He alone endured and prospered, matching the husky in strength, savagery, and cunning. Then he was a masterful dog. And what made him dangerous was the fact that the club of the man in the red sweater had knocked all blind plunk and rashness out of his desire for mastery. He was preeminently cunning and could bide his time with a patience that has nothing less than primitive. I adore Jack's writing. I think it's so crude, primitive too, very potent. And this is something that, he was criticized for. I'm not going to read Jack London, like he's just too brutal. But that's the essence of nature, right? It's so crude and brutal sometimes when we see animal fights. And let's not talk about humans. That's even worse, actually. But that's the nature, right? And he is really able to put it into words so clearly, so strongly. And this is what made him such an unforgettable writer. So I'll keep reading and probably won't share much about the story from now on. I'm half through, so I'm not going to spoil the end, but maybe I'm going to read a few more paragraphs just to share the beautiful writing of Jack London. Look at this beautiful landscape. Che bello.
Yeah. Northern California forests, that a lot of the California people kind of fell for this. Okay, let's plant eucalyptus. They grow fast.
They do grow very fast.
They'll be the new lumber.
Yeah.
And then it was not good.
No, and then they haven't had particularly wildfires here.
That's why you don't.
It's been so long since I finished this book, probably like 3 weeks already, but finally giving you my final thoughts on The Call of the Wild. It was extremely hard. The more you go on reading this book and the more we are shocked by the exploitation of these dogs and their resilience to keep fighting, keep moving on through the difficult conditions of the weather and passing from one crew to the other, and some people didn't even know what they were doing. I promise no spoilers, but I do have to give you a little bit of hope, because in the midst of all this tragedy, Buck has the fortune of making an encounter that saved his life, and this man and Buck developed such a unique bond, and I'm just gonna share a few lines that describes it so well. He had a way of taking Buck's head roughly between his hands and resting his own head upon Buck's, of shaking him back and forth while calling him ill names that to Buck were love names. Buck knew no greater joy than that rough embrace and the sound of murmured oaths. And at each jerk back and forth, it seemed that his heart would be shaken out of his body, so great its ecstasy. And when released, he sprang to his feet, his mouth laughing, his eyes eloquent, his throat vibrant with unuttered sound, and in that fashion remained without movement. John Thornton would reverently exclaim, "God, you can all but speak." Just a few words, and we see this bond described so well by Jack London. My thought is that although the violence, for me, this was a very heartwarming story, there's a way with the instinct of this animal that we could compare to humans as well, because he had a sense of danger and a sense of what can be trusted. And this is our instinct that sometimes we don't listen to, right? We might have some energy, some vibes over a certain project or a certain person, and we just feel uneasy over certain things. And I think we always second guess ourselves. The wildlife, that's what they rely on. And I wonder if we would follow our instinct all the time, where would they take us? So this is what I took from the book. Beautifully written. And I would love to hear from you if you read it, or what were your feelings about this book, and if you haven't, are you curious to read it? I wanted to make this video a little longer and showing you all the books that I bought in the secondhand bookstores in California of Jack London, but that might take way too long, so maybe I'll do a second video on the books that interested me, because some are really precious. There's a book I have that was printed in 1928, and it's such a rarity. I don't understand how they could price it $5. I don't know. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my first reading vlog. Let me know in the comments. I look forward to see you soon here back on Uncommon Reader. I'll be back next week with a new video. Thank you for watching and happy reading.